risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
Weeknights on S3 are all about winning, and winning big with Wheel of Fortune. For the first time in South Africa, Wheel of Fortune is on S3, Monday to Friday at 7:30 p.m, where Rorisang has South Africans locked into the world of word puzzles. Watch contestants spin the wheel to stand a chance of walking away with 100,000 Rand, or a car valued at over 500,000 Rand. You can also be part of the show and win big. To be part of the show, log on to wheeloffortunesa.tv and let the wheel decide your fate. Channel your inner wordsmith with Wheel of Fortune SA on S3. Open up.
The Talking Point on SAFM. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM.
I see there's a storm on Twitter regarding the issue that came up with Wonga and him saying that there was a merger with the NP and the ANC at a certain point, and he brought what's his name, Martinus van Schalkwyk in when he became what's his name, the tourism minister, and somebody went to Google and they're saying that there was a merger, but with the new, because remember the National Party, if you historically remember, ended up being renamed the New National Party, and Google claims it as a merger, that the New National Party announced a dissolution and a merger with the ANC. If their members joined, I agree. So we've been disagreeing and agreeing and disagreeing with with the producers during the news. A merger is something different, as I understand it. When they said their members must close the party and then join a different party, because ideologically they were way too different for them, as far as I'm concerned, to ever come together. But it's fine. We can agree to disagree. Welcome to hour 2, guys, of The Talking Point. Never a boring moment here on SFM 104.2, 107 nationwide, where we lead the conversation. You join whenever you want to on 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032, or the SMS line 41391. That's 41391 at 150 to you, or on WhatsApp 06141041047, 06141041047, or on X, or the platform formerly known as Twitter. We are at SFM Radio and hashtag SFM Talking Point if you want to talk to us. So, South Africa's democratic headache. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? We're continuing our conversation this morning looking at where we are regarding this coalition government, or the government of national unity as it's been currently proposed by the ANC. Many are comparing this to 94 and the first democratic elections, but others argue that it's not the same. It's no doubt brought strain to the nation as political parties are not in agreement as to a way forward. So this morning we thought to look at what this is doing to us as a nation. What does it do to our psychology, and why is it so difficult for these political parties to put our country first? And we're going to talk to Dr. Seth Cooper, the president of the Pan-African Psychology Union, former political prisoner and leader of the Black Consciousness Movement, and a member of the 1970s group of activists. And also we're going to talk to Professor Nzigilelo Breakfast, who is a professor of political sciences and the director of the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution at Nelson Mandela University. But first, your voice notes.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Morning KG, this is Ngabs Eqibala. I wanna this government of national unit, or whatever form of government, I mean, even if it's coalition of some sort, it is fine as long as they will have decided by the by next week. I just have a problem, but I wish we can understand that when people are negotiating, they sacrifice some of the things that they were willing to do. So when one is going to a negotiating table, he's ready to sacrifice some of whatever that he was wishing for. My worry is that some out of the negotiations after they are done will be called flip-floppers, others life will go as normal. So there are things that will be compromised there in those negotiations. I just wish we can all as South Africans understand that. Thank you.
Hi, Khalish Mabusela from Mokopane. I think they did not forget the fundamentals, as you say. Some of the demands they put forward are done in order to hold the executive accountable. We have seen how the ANC behaves. So if these key positions are held by only the ANC, they will continue to do as they did in the past. So it is important that the opposition hold some of the key positions, especially even in the committees where only the ANC were using their majority to push some of the unnecessary issues. Thank you very much.
Good morning, KG. I like what you are saying, KG. The most politicians, they don't care about South Africans. They only care about themselves. Therefore, this is a clear clarification of showing ANC has never been a problem. Yes, there are some certain individuals in ANC having a problem because ANC brought the solutions. The parties don't want anything. They said 2024 is their 1994. Yes, it's their 1994. So let them come with a solution. This is Lebutawa Khobe.
Morning, KG. Even if the Mkhonto season will not be present at in Parliament that day, they will be voting as usual because the quorum consists of 135 members. Even if they cannot be there, nothing will change. Proceedings will proceed as usual. Thank you.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen. You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM.
Welcome back. It's 16 minutes past 10, 16 minutes past 10 on SFM. So we're shifting gear. We're continuing a conversation this morning looking at where we are regarding a coalition government or, as proposed, a government of national unity as proposed by the African National Congress. Many are comparing this to the 1994 first democratic elections, but others argue that it's not the same. This has no doubt brought strain to the nation as political parties are not in agreement as to a way forward. So this morning we thought to look at what this does to us as a nation. What does it do to our psyche, our psychology, and why is it so difficult for the political parties to put the countries first? And to lead the conversation, we're joined by Dr. Seth Cooper, president of the Pan-African Psychology Union, former political prisoner and leader of the Black Consciousness Movement and member of the 1970s group of activists. Also, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who is professor of political sciences and the director of the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution at Nelson Mandela University. Good morning to the both of you. 8 days since the election was declared. As I said when we started the show, it's 8 days today since the election was declared and we're still on pause. Why are we still on pause and should we still be on pause? Good morning, Dr. Cooper.
Good morning, KG.
Yes, we are still on pause 8 days post the declaration of the elections.
Well, I think we always have this drama whether we want it or not, and largely because there is such uncertainty. And even when experts give us the state of what is statutorily supposed to happen, our trust deficit in the country is so low that we even disbelieve that as if it's an interpretation which may be different from the law. So the trust deficit contributes to our levels of uncertainty because we've been let down so often and so badly in all the things we expected from leadership. And here I'm very specifically talking about political as well as other leadership, because at times of crisis, you ought to see a real, true leadership emerge. But in terms of the crises we've been experiencing, we have not seen the rise of good leadership to rise above narrow viewpoints, rise above their own self-interest, and seriously address the nation about its needs. So people still fall back on their own positions. Will I survive? Will I be a cabinet minister? Will I not? And as a result of that, their lack of confidence in what's happening reaches out to us. And we already distrust them, but it feeds into that distrust. And we are unable to get out of that quagmire.
Yeah. Let's also bring, and I think when you put the issue of a trust deficit on the table, I think it's a fantastic way to start it, Dr. Cooper, because when you say trust deficit, it's also a reflection of what the voters said, right? On the 29th of May when they went to the polls. Professor Breakfast, good morning. And maybe let's start it with what Dr. Cooper just said around the issue of a trust deficit 8 days into the declaration of an election, and yet no seventh administration formed just yet. Why is there such a big trust deficit, and that trust deficit from both clearly the politicians and us as the citizens? Good morning, Professor Breakfast. Did we lose Professor Breakfast? He's on the line. Good morning, Professor Breakfast. Okay. Okay. They will continue. The producers will try and call Professor Breakfast on another line. But I read an article of yours, Dr. Cooper, that where you spoke about the fact that there's many lessons which these elections, are supposed to have taught us, right? Yes. And that we can't ignore. And one of the things you said in that article was that one of the things that stand out to you is that the people count. And I think that's the first thing that the election taught us, isn't it? That the people really do count. And seemingly the politicians had forgotten that the people do count. Why is that?
I think they've been so self-engrossed, There's a term in psychology we call narcissism, where you look at everything as if it's you that's the center of the world. You are the sun around which everybody else rotates. And I know that in the mid to late 90s, you saw these politicians strutting around. We've got this wonderful constitution. We are doing so much for you. Ask not what you should do, but what we are going to do for you. And that dependency has increased remarkably to such an extent that we've had a vibrant civil society, challenging, raising questions. You know, KG, when you're on the microphone there, you're going to get a multitude of voices raising questions and so on. But these persons have become immune to people who they only interact with in the reaction. They only bother every 2 to 3 years when they have elections, and that's when they'll appeal to us. So doing some crazy things, trying to appeal for our vote. But other than that, totally forgotten. When people petition, when they protest, when they come and say, look, this is not working, the minister doesn't pitch, the DG doesn't pitch, a low-level civil servant comes and gets the petition, and it goes into a deep hole. Yet, during COVID, when nobody was making an income, these were continuing to get their salaries for doing sweet nothing for more than 2 years.
And yet we find ourselves again, I love where you're going, Dr. Cooper, and yet we find ourselves here, because, you use the word narcissism. We find ourselves here again where 8 days into the declaration of the elections, it is the politicians again, and I go back to your article where you say the people count, right? And yet we find ourselves 8 days into the declaration of the election with the politicians still saying, no, we want this, no, we won't do this, no, we don't want to work with this one, no, we won't do this, no, we won't do that.
And they're ignoring their voting population, and even that voting population, KG, is a minority. 16.2 million people voted out of 27 point something million, and at least 1/3 of the population that's entitled to vote is not voting. So it's a minority of a minority who voted, and they have spoken. Yet these, and usually it's guys, they're not listening. Their hormones are riding high. They're challenging one another. They're putting questions out there and conditions when they haven't even talked. You cannot put conditions and hold the country to ransom. What you're doing is you're thrusting the population, you're thrusting the country into severe crisis. A leader should lead from the front, not put out hasty slogans and tired demands, which we know they stand for, and many of them have failed on. The electorate has spoken. Whatever that vote of the electorate, you must give credence to it, and you must take your call from the people, because what happens, you as political leaders are on one side, and on the other is the majority, the population, especially those who live on the periphery, eking out an existence every day, and you ignore them. Their cries go unheard. So if you...
These lines are not kind to me. But I think the line that is cleared is that of Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who we haven't even had the opportunity to say good morning to just yet, while they now try to clear Dr. Cooper's line. Professor Breakfast, good morning. I hope now you can hear me, and I hope we can engage. And I want to, as I get you into the conversation, go back to the start and how the issue of a trust deficit was brought to the discussion by Dr. Cooper, and that trust deficit being really on both ends. The trust deficit that clearly now exists between the politicians who 8 days into the declaration of election are yet to come to an agreement on whether it's a GNU, a coalition, or whatever it would look like, because of a trust deficit that exists between them, and a trust deficit that really clearly was spoken by the voter on the 29th of May when they went and voted. Why do you think such a deep trust deficit exists on all ends in South Africa? Good morning, Prof.
I don't know what happened.
Well, you're here now. I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, let me repeat the question around the issue of a trust deficit. At the start of our conversation, it was brought to the table by Dr. Cooper, who's other panelist, that there clearly is a trust deficit that exists between the citizenry ourselves, and there is also now clearly a trust deficit that is existing with the politicians who are yet to form, whether it be a coalition government or a government of national unity. Why do you think there's such a major trust deficit that exists in South Africa across the board?
I do agree with that kind of argument. That's why, for instance, the electorate have sort of like reimagined their social contract with the powers that be. Otherwise, the ANC would have been in power if there was no gap between the citizens and the powers that be. So the mere fact that one-party dominance is a thing of the past, I think, is an expression of that the way things are is not the way things should be, because for the first time since 1994, the ANC has been dealt with a blow in a big way, largely because of lack of responsiveness by the politicians. I think there has been a slow pace of service delivery. But also what compounds the situation is the institutionalization of corruption. We've seen, for instance, political parties being used as a vehicle in pursuit of personal accumulation. We've seen politicians employing social and political capital to amass wealth. I mean, for instance, if you look at the BBBE model, it has produced a tiny minority of politicians who are aligned to the ruling party with access lucrative tenders. And people can see this conspicuous consumption, how the state machinery in particular is being used as a center of accumulation. No wonder I think there is this gap between citizens and politicians, among other things, of course.
Yeah. I'm going to ask for your indulgence for a few seconds, gentlemen, the both of you, because it's 10:31 on SAFM and it's time for the latest news headlines. And Musa is standing by.
Thank you very much, KG. It's actually Mudupi Mohlahlana with the headlines. A very good morning to you. It's almost a year since a national dialogue on coalitions was hosted at the University of the Western Cape in August, aimed at developing a legal framework to govern coalitions at both provincial and national level. Lobby group AfriForum says it is taking the national energy regulator NERSA to court, and the Israeli minister Benny Gantz has resigned from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's emergency government. Details of these and other stories coming up at 11.
My apologies, Mudupi Mohlahlana. The rand is currently trading at 18 rand 83 to the dollar, 23 rand 94 to the pound, and 20 rand 26 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mixed at the closing bell. The JSE is weaker in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are red across the board. Gold is trading at $2,295 and platinum at $973 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $79.78 a barrel.
You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM.
Welcome back at 10:32. As you join us, we've been in conversation this morning looking at where we are regarding the coalition government or the government of national unity or whatever comes out really. Many are comparing this government of national unity to the 1994 first democratic elections government of national unity, but others argue that it's not the same. This has no doubt brought strain to the nation as political parties are not in agreement as to a way forward. So this morning we thought to look at what this does to us as a nation. What does it do to our psychology, and why is it so difficult for the political parties to put the countries first? And we've had on the line Dr. Seth Cooper. If you don't know who he is the president of the Pan-African Psychology Union, former political prisoner and leader of the Black Consciousness Movement, and a member of the 1970s group of activists. And we also have Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who is Professor of Political Sciences and the Director of the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution at Nelson Mandela University. So, and then, the results were declared, Dr. Cooper. Last week, we were told on Sunday night, we lost Dr. Cooper. Hopefully, we get him back. So, the election was declared, Prof, last week, post also that press conference on Saturday night of, disgruntled political parties who were saying that, as far as they're concerned, the counting was rigged in the IEC, therefore the election shouldn't be declared. But long and short, the election was declared. And we know what the rules say. The rules say 14 days post the declaration of the election, a government has to be formed. And we know that there's now a suggestion on the table of a GNU. And we know now, at least publicly, we know that, there's major public disagreement on what a GNU should look like, or whether even we should have a GNU in the first place. What does that leave the citizen? Because again, we're out now. It's back to them, Prof. It's ultimately back to them, and we're not even privy to the kind of discussions that they will have, the kind of things that they're going to dangle to each other or take away from each other. We're not privy to those conversations. We're left out again. But those discussions and the decisions that get made at those discussions impact us directly. And the one thing that remains constant is we live in the most unequal society in the world, and that is what I think the voter wanted to remind the government of the day, that we have this gap that ultimately has to be narrowed. What should we be thinking when all of these questions are being bandied about by the politicians, Professor?
Should I weigh in, KG?
Yes, go ahead, Prof.
On a lighter note, I'm not a full professor of political science. I'm an associate professor. I don't want to be in trouble. But anyway, coming back to the issue that you have raised, the challenge is that coalition arrangements, in my opinion, are not a byproduct of a democracy, because people don't vote for a coalition arrangement. They vote for political parties.
Yes.
Politicians then decide without the knowledge of the people who they want to join forces with, which is problematic because it takes away then the element of a democracy. Because what is democracy is government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, politicians have a tendency to rush into joining forces amongst each other without developing a conflict management mechanism to deal with their internal differences.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, for instance, these coalition arrangements have been unworkable and unstable at local government level because of this missing link between coalition arrangements and the conflict management mechanism. So we need, I would argue, a framework to bind coalition partners, after they've struck a deal. The other challenge is that when these coalition partners come to the table, they don't discuss models of development on how to take the country forward, but they discuss musical chairs, which is problematic. But what compounds the situation, of course, is the fact that I want to argue that the framers of the Constitution, they never envisage a situation whereby the ANC will be out of power. That's why, for instance, Section 51 of the Constitution says that political parties have only 14 days, because that tells me that what came into their minds when they were making the Constitution was that everything was going to revolve around the ANC. Now, when you draw from international best practices, you look at other coalition arrangements that have been quite successful on a global scale, in particular in Europe, in France, in Germany, Holland, and so on. Definitely, they have, a longer period to engage in deliberation. So I'm arguing that 2 weeks or 14 days is not enough to discuss about the future of the country. So there needs to be a refinement of the Constitution to accommodate, some of the needs of the country.
Yeah. That is fascinating to me, that even the people that crafted the Constitution did not anticipate a mere 30 years later a time that would look like now, a time that we find ourselves in, and yet here we are. This time has arrived. I've got you back, Dr. Cooper. Have I got you back? We still don't have Dr. Cooper.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good.
I'm going back to your article. In your article, one of the things that you also say as you go on is that the people, they do remember. Right, and they have a remarkable memory of those who they will entrust, if only tentatively. After so many years of watching certain people flaunt wealth in front of them, when we craft, there's this argument that's been brought on the table by, amongst others, for example, former President Thabo Mbeki, that we should have conversations about crafting the kind of society that we want as we go forward, once the politicians have decided to form a government, because we have to craft a society for ourselves outside of just what the politicians are saying we should be. If we were to have those conversations, because we remember, as you've said in your article, we remember the wealth that's been flaunted very brazenly by those that have high and elaborate levels of wealth. When we have those conversations, if we should have those conversations, where should we start? What should we be talking about even?
I think that you need those political parties.
In those conversations.
They need to be there. They need to be part of the agenda, but they should not constitute or dominate the agenda. Mm-hmm. You need civil society actors, and we've got a rise in civil society actions. You've got professional groupings that can provide the guidance and the mediation and interventions that can refocus discussions. You've got all of those. We've got those skills around. And that's why I dare say some of these smaller parties very misguidedly wrote to the Chief Justice to say, convene us, ignoring the clash of executive roles versus judiciary, etc. But the country is in a crisis. In that crisis modality, we should be getting the kinds of voices that are beginning to emerge, but not the old, tired voices making excuses for us.
Yeah.
We all know there is a baseline, and that baseline is people have been let down. In the richest country on the continent, as you correctly say, we have the highest unemployment and poverty rates in the world, when we should not be having that. You have political parties, for instance, who want to push for those meager dependency grants, and it costs more to administer the grants than the amounts put out. We have other parties who want to stop those, not realizing that you can have a castle on a hill, but around it, if there are shacks, that castle is worth very little. We have the majority of our population under 30, and they are out of the system, except for those who remain in school and don't drop out in the third term, in high schools and in primary schools as well as universities. They add to the numbers that we don't count. When it comes to registration of voters, they don't have an automatic system to get Home Affairs to link them in the schooling system. When you get your ID, register them so that they'll be ready when they turn 18 to vote. That kind of caring, that kind of involvement with the population is simply not happening. Our institutions, for whom huge amounts of monies are paid to do these things, are failing us. So bottom line, our system is failing us. The democracy that we've conceived is not what the population wants. That's why the majority don't participate in it. The ones who participate in it, and besides religion being high as a growth industry, it's politicians, political parties, form a political party. Professor Breakfast and Cooper will form a party, and one of us will get in. We'll share the spoils. I'll watch how government does business and tell my cousin to send a tender. I will speak to a bureaucrat to make sure that they flag the tender. That's how it works. The way government operates now is a stop to job creation, because everything is put out on tender. Who do you think is watching the tender? The clever people, the smart minority, the big companies, including the stock exchange, are getting richer. The poor are getting poorer. So job creation is a break.
Yeah, and that gap is not closing. That gap between the haves and the have-nots. There's a lot of people that want to engage. There's a lot of people that want to engage the both of you. That's why I'm stopping you mid your conversation, because I don't want to gatekeep this conversation between yourself and Tsigelelo Breakfast. Pesi in Limpopo. Hi, good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Good, thank you. Pesi, I'm hoping you can ask your comment quickly, put your comment across quickly, and I get everyone through, and then get my guests to respond.
No, thanks very much. I think the call that one will make is that parties who are engaged must be able to engage with a positive attitude to save the country, to ensure that there's government, because ultimately if parties can't agree, there's a possibility of insurgence by the public. And I think at all times we should be able to avoid that. Ideology and all of that should find space as a political level, but we must be able to come closer to each other in the interest of the public. And we can't afford that we should be able to miss this space, because it will be at the detriment of the political system in the country. And for those who are advancing that they may not necessarily be part of a government, they are doing that at their own peril, because the public is not in any way interested in going for whatever instead of putting government and be able to service them.
Yeah.
And I think we should be able to avoid that, because there will be a public insurgence if we are not careful in terms of our approach.
Thanks for your call, Pesi. Lennox Class in Centurion. Hi, Lennox.
Hi, thank you very much, KG. Mine is very quick, really. KG, pre the elections, all the parties went out and marketed their manifestos. The reality of the matter is that the South Africans or the electorate did not entrust any of these parties with the necessary threshold to govern on their own. Now, everyone has been coming, telling us what had happened for us to get into this very unfamiliar territory. Now, we would really like to hear, we are here, what do we do to go forward? Because we cannot wait until we're happy to leave. We must leave now. And none of the parties got the necessary mandate. All these parties are behaving as if they received the overwhelming majority.
And all of them are forgetting the people of South Africa. That, for me, is the most disappointing part. Because because the truth of the matter is the people of South Africa are the ones that said we are not giving anybody an overwhelming majority.
What that means, KG, you cannot wish to enforce your manifesto. Right now, we say, at this point in time, the NGU is the necessary and the logical way to go, where no single party is going to behave as if they have the mandate. Come one, come all. Now, the South Africans are going to see who is serving their self-interest. I'm not undermining the level of trust entrusted to this individual. Even if you voted by 9%, it's 9% that matters, South Africans. But don't want to overlook those who received 20, 50, 40. They're equally representing South Africans.
Yeah.
That's why I feel people who come and talk to us, they should tell us where to from here, not what led us into this.
Yeah.
I understand the significance of history, which is the necessary reflection of where we come from for us to be here. And how is this going to help us to go forward?
Yeah.
We know all about that now, but where do we go? How can we convince those who do not want to participate in undoing this crisis?
Yeah. For me, Lennox, for me, I keep going back to what I said when I started the show today. I said, how do we make sure that we narrow that gap that exists between those that have and those that don't have? Because that's the reality and the pain of some who live in South Africa today. Thanks, Lennox. Mpho, you are in Sekhukhune. Hi, Mpho.
Yeah, good morning, KG and the panel. Well, I think there are many things which you yourself and the panelists have said, which I don't think I hold a different view. For instance, the point about saying politicians are now going around engaging each other in a way to the exclusion of the people. I'm not in agreement with that line of reasoning, and here's my reason. I think we define our democracy as participatory and representative. And representative in the context of saying people will vote for people who represent them in the legislatures at different levels. Secondly, that when people were going to vote, they were aware that they are voting political parties. And I'm sure you have seen how independent candidates did not do well.
Yes,
but we're voting for political parties quite conscious of what this political party stands for and their manifesto. And therefore, when politicians comment and engage on this process of GNU, we shouldn't forget that they are in the context of public representative and that they do have their own structures. You can take the example of the ANC, which has got branches in almost every ward in the country. The assumption is that whatever the ANC does at the leadership level, this is a reflection of the organization in its entirety. The question about political parties and voters, I think one professor said they are a minority because the other people who qualify to vote have not participated in the voting.
Yes.
Not participating in voting itself is a political statement. we may differ as to what does that mean. There are people who may choose not to vote, maybe because they assume that the party Soren's will win. Some may not go to elections thinking that nothing will change. But I'm saying we should not interpret those who are not voting as if they represent the true meaning or the true measure of our democracy. Because elections are about the expressions of the people.
Yes.
So in this case where we are, people have expressed themselves as they did. And unfortunately, we are where we are. But we should not blame political parties for engaging one another, even the civil society themselves. They were voters in this exercise. But I'm not saying they shouldn't have excluded. They would be included.
Your line is starting to let me down, Paul, but I agree with most of what you're saying. I also agree with what you're saying about not voting, because I've said this even publicly on the radio that if you don't vote, unfortunately, what you do have to own is that those that do vote are going to speak on your behalf. Do you want to comment, Mr. Breakfast?
Is a political statement. However, it begs the question about the acceptability or the validity of the elections, because democracy also has to do with legitimacy. So if then you have a majority of people who have not voted, I think it does beg the question about whether are the electoral outcomes a reflection of the will of the people. The other issue is that there are different forms of democracy. I don't think that there is a monolithic form of a democracy. For instance, one of the forms of democracy is participatory democracy, and we don't have that in our country, whereby people are involved, directly in decision making. We have a representative kind of a democracy whereby people elect leaders who represent them, and that was my argument, that people don't vote for coalition arrangements, but they vote for political parties who make decisions on behalf of them. The other issue is that I think Professor Cooper has hit the nail on the head, that we need an independent body that will enforce these coalition arrangements, because people are saying that we must not historicize, we must just focus on the way out of this. So I agree with Professor Cooper that we need this independent body, but also we need to include civil society. Though I'm critical of civil society in the sense, yes, it can be part of those deliberations, but also civil society includes the market forces. I think we must just keep that in mind, because you don't want a situation now whereby you are being outmaneuvered on the basis of economic power. I think that's that. Now, we are in the build-up to constituting a government, and that build-up, among other things, entails negotiations. And I think in that process, political parties, they need to attack problems hard and be soft on each other, and realize that the winner takes all mentality is not a way out. So these negotiations should not be a zero-sum game.
Yeah. Dr. Cooper, do you want to comment on what the callers said? Dr. Cooper? Have we lost Dr. Cooper? The lines have really not been kind. Is he back? Dr. Cooper? Dr. Cooper, are you back?
Yes, I am.
There's Dr.
Yes,
Cooper.
I am.
Oh, the lines have not been kind to me, and I apologize. Probably the problem is on my side. I'm hoping that you had the opportunity to hear those callers and their thoughts, and you can comment on what they had to say.
I think some of the callers are very accurate that the problem has been a political one, and we must expect these political persons to put right the problem. To deny that we're in a crisis is also foolish, because we clearly are in a crisis, and the persons who have not made it on the lists, many of them are highly stressed, rightfully so, because they don't have the fact packages that they can rely on for the next 5 years. It means that there needs to be a distinct change in the way political entities, including Parliament, behave. It needs to be much more responsive to the needs of the population, which currently our system is not. And so when former President Mbeki says we need a different conversation, he's very right, because in 1993, the current arrangement was reached behind closed doors and sanctified over time into a fact. We need to change that. We need to change politics dominating our lives. We need to see growth and development, and we can do it because this country has the money. Instead of borrowing from overseas, we need our banks to launch debt for the government, because we put money into those banks and they ought to be responsive. We need to change many of the institutions that are not functioning. We should scrap them. NSFAS, etc. don't work. The Treasury can deposit money directly into the university account. You will get a whole horde of fat cats then having to go out and work like the rest, those few of us who still are able to work. We need to change the manner in which government continues to offer tenders instead of offering open job creation opportunities, ensuring that when I get a tender, I am showing and proving that I'm not only taking a few learnerships or apprenticeships on board, that there's going to be a trajectory for them to work in future. So it's not just short term. There are many, many simple things one can do, and therefore you need the expertise of education, professions, civil society, community-based groups, together with the politicians. The politicians need to listen to us, not the other way around, about what's going wrong and what can be put right, because out of the mouths of people who are not in power will come the ideas for salvation for this country. Otherwise, we're going to have crisis upon crisis, which we cannot afford. It's either time to lead or leave. Let the people's will be heard and be manifest.
Yeah. Oh, such powerful things that you sign off with. Out of the mouths of people that are not in power will come the future of this country. Thank you, and I apologize to the both of you for the crisis of the lines that we had that interfered so gravely with our conversation. But thank you for your thoughts, your insights, your writings. I didn't even get into all of the things that you wrote that I read and wanted to talk about this morning, Dr. Cooper. Dr. Seth Cooper is president of the Pan-African Psychology Union, the former political prisoner and a leader of the Black Consciousness Movement, and a member of that 70s group of activists, Ntsikelelo Breakfast. He said he's not a full professor yet. He's in the political sciences and the director of the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution at the Nelson Mandela University. Thank you to the both of you for the time, for your thoughts. Let's hope that as Dr. Seth Cooper just said, the mouths of those that are not in power end up being heard and fed by those that are in power. Thank you. It's 11:01. Modupi Mohlahlana is standing by with the news.
Very much, KG. The top stories this hour: still no framework for coalition politics, and AfriForum to fight the electricity price hikes. A very good morning to you. There's still no legal framework in place following a national dialogue on coalitions hosted 10 months ago. It was convened by Deputy President Paul Mashatile as leader of government business. The dialogue was aimed at developing a legal framework to govern coalitions at provincial and national level. Mercedes Besent has more.
The predictions that parties may not receive a majority of 50% plus one vote to govern nationally or provincially after the elections have become a reality. 3 of the 9 provinces require coalition governments. These are the Northern Cape, Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Similarly, the country needs the cooperation of other parties to form a national government once the National Assembly has been constituted, to elect a president who has to be inaugurated within 5 days after his or her election. And while the first sitting of Parliament has to be convened within a week, the new and third largest party, Umkhonto weSizwe, has written to the Chief Justice and Parliament to stop the sitting from going ahead.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says regardless of the form or composition of the incoming administration, it is important that the momentum of the reforms instituted by the 6th administration be retained. In his letter to the nation today, Ramaphosa says that economic growth, transformation and job creation have been at the center of his government's administration, and a change in direction from the programs to achieve this would derail the progress that has already been made. He cites a recent study by the Bureau for Economic Research, which says that there is no need to reinvent the wheel with regards to the structural reforms in the energy, logistics, water and telecommunication sectors currently undertaken by the government. 180 families at Otongati on the north of Durban have been identified by the KZN government as being in dire need of assistance after last week's tornado. Today, building materials will be brought to the area and these families will be given priority to rebuild their homes. Last week, a tornado ripped through the area, leaving about 11 people dead. While immediate relief has been provided to the affected families, building material has been identified as the critical next essential, as hundreds of homes have been reduced to rubble. Provincial COCTA spokesperson Nonala Ndlovu explains how these families are going to be assisted.
180 families are totally displaced, and those are being put in the priority list. As the materials start moving into the area from Monday going onwards, those are the people that you're going to deal with first, so that we are able to decant those facilities and people actually go back into their own homes. So that is the priority right now.
Lobby group AfriForum says it is taking the National Energy Regulator to court. This comes in an effort to stop NERSA from considering municipalities' applications for electricity tariff hikes scheduled for implementation on the 1st of July without the mandatory cost studies. A High Court order from October 2022 and the Electricity Regulation Act both require these cost studies for tariff increase applications. Here's AfriForum's Morne Mostert.
For the past decade, there was actually a responsibility of municipalities to set up what the Act calls a cost of supply study. It's basically a study that informs you on what the exact tariff is that the municipality can ask for NERSA. Remember that municipalities make a profit from selling electricity, so it's very important for us, the consumers, to understand on what tariff they charge.
The National Consumer Commission has urged anyone in possession of a 50mm single-use neutralizing shampoo in Dark and Lovely Moisture Plus to stop using it immediately. This comes after the manufacturer L'Oreal flagged that it detected bacteria in the shampoo which could lead to scalp infections in those with a compromised immune system. The Commission's Prudence Muilwa says the bacteria was detected in the children's shampoo.
The reason why the Commission is also communicating is that we want to ensure that the product is brought back and that consumers stop using the product. But the recall in terms of Section 60 is done by them. In terms of the law, we can institute a recall, but in this regard, the law also allows that they can institute a recall. Every supplier who sells goods in South African markets has an obligation to run tests on an ongoing basis. In the event you pick up that there is a product failure or issues of safety in your product, you have an obligation to recall the product and notify the Commission.
And Israeli Minister Benny Gantz has resigned from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's emergency government. His resignation is said to be due to Netanyahu putting political considerations ahead of strategic decisions. It comes after a raid by the Israeli Defense Forces on a refugee camp in Gaza at the weekend to rescue 4 Israeli hostages that were kidnapped last year. During the raid, 274 people were killed, including women and children. Senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute, Naeem Jina.
270 Palestinians killed, 4 Israelis killed in the process, and 4 Israelis rescued. And the attackers or rescuers, however you want to put it, came in from what is supposed to be a humanitarian pier on aid trucks to conduct their exercise. It would be scandalous under any normal circumstances.
The top story this hour, there's still no legal framework in place following a national dialogue on coalitions hosted 10 months ago. For SAFM News, ke Modupi Makgalemele.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation. The Talking Point on SAFM. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM. Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Morning, KG. South Africa is currently like a being without a head, a body without a head, running around, headless. And then there is a system that wants to put that head back on, but all others are trying their utmost to keep the country in that headless state.
Good morning, KG. Interesting topic on the political parties and government of national unity. I just wanted to ask, Jacob Zuma is actually an ANC member. His daughter's an ANC member. So is his son, sitting in Dubai, an ANC member. And I wonder how many of the MK party people that got seats in parliament are actually ANC members. And when they come to parliament, if they don't agree with the different things that ANC and the other parties are voting on and everything, suddenly they actually revert to their ANC colours and then do a reverse takeover of the ANC. Yeah, just interesting question. How many of them are still ANC members?
Khomozo, the South Africans are not fair to themselves. If they like the constitution, they must make sure that they don't vote for people who says no, they want to scrap the constitution or the judiciary. If ANC goes to bed with those guys, then let us know that South Africa is in trouble. Because Zuma wants his own laws, Malema wants the whole constitution to scrap and change it to a socialist. No. We are in trouble. Okay, sleep over here.
We rather have Steenhuisen as the deputy president than have Paul Mashatile, a questionable character who cannot even explain how did he get money to buy over 200 million house in Cape Town. We rather have Helen Zille as a Minister of Finance rather than have Floyd Shibambo, who was the mastermind behind the haste of VBS Bank in Limpopo, who together with Julius Malema collapsed the Limpopo government, who was rejected by the RUPTA. We know that Floyd Shibambo is the proxy of Julius Malema. He was sent by Julius Malema to the Rubets to source some land without compensation, and he was shown the middle finger. We cannot have such characters in government of national unity. So it's a blessing that we don't have them, and they rejected the government of national unity. Active citizen in Limpopo.
Shalom, KG. This is wisdom. I believe as a nation, there's something that we are ignoring. We are so busy looking to the fruits, that the fruits of the tree, they are not good for us, which is this leadership. But we are not going to the root, because what we see then leadership is a reflection of our society. This is, how is it? And it is us that have voted, have put those leaders that are there, that we call leaders, that at the same time we are complaining about. So what we need to do, we need to go back to the root. And I believe this is going to be a fertile ground for the emerging of true leader, because right now we don't have true leaders, mature people to able to lead and direct and guide this country in this time. Thank you. Bye.
Morning Kumuzo, Moses Ndeben Kumuzo, as black person who have seen the apartheid, who have witnessed the dawn of democracy. It is very much sad to hear our fellow decorated blacks who are coming on the air denouncing the corruption between ANC and DA. They are just protecting their interest, which they kickbacks. It is not true that the apartheid will come back when ANC and DA join. But as long as we want good for our country, let's involve any race, any human being here in South Africa for betterment of our country, not for our bank accounts. Because most of these people who are making noise here are just protecting their bank accounts. Moses Deben.
Morning, KG. This is Magdalene from Bloom. I've got an amendment proposal for election process. We've got 300 political parties contesting against each other for elections. We need 30 days for election. A certain number of political parties, say 20 political parties, should be put on a date. And those citizens who are interested in those political parties should be given a day off, special day off for voting. The voting should be the scanning of the thumb and the signing of the register. Magdalene from Bloom. Thank you.
KG, I concur with your guests who are there. We can't improve this country if we employ people who have no qualifications of that job to improve this country. We deploy people who are not educated just because they are politically active. That's why this country is aging, is dirty, poor administration, poor planning. We need to involve professors like those who are your guests and other analysts who can help the government how to do things regardless of political affiliation. Thank you, KG.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen. You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your WhatsApps. Keep them coming on 061-410-4107. They force us to think. They give us ideas on future topics, etc., etc. Keep them coming, 061-410-4107. We're shifting gear. Energy transition. Where are we? As a country, we've been so occupied, we still are, by what is happening in our political sphere that we have forgotten another burning issue in our energy transition. And perhaps we must remember on this day where we're being told load reduction is back, at least here in Gauteng, an article that was published in the My Broadband. Sia, stop laughing at me. My Broadband website in May reminds us that South Africa is expected to propose a timeline for the shutdown of coal-fired power plants in a bid to secure about $2.5 billion American in climate finance. if you may remember that under the agreement, which was first announced in 2021, our country is set to receive assistance under certain conditions, one being that it cuts its dependence on coal, which accounts for 4/5 of the nation's electricity output. To remind us where we are and whether this is a good step, even in dealing with the country's energy transition, we're joined by Dabi Dabi, CEO of Granville Energy. Dabi, good morning. Thank you so much for your time. What do you do, just for a quick context, at Granville Energy?
Good morning, KG, and good morning to your listeners. I am the founder and CEO of Granville Energy. So what we do at Granville Energy, we are set to provide or bring access to clean and affordable electricity to 1 billion people on the continent. And we do that by playing in the entire value chain, where we design and manufacture solar power systems and also roll out microgrids for communities.
So your primary business is solar, as you and I are having this conversation?
Yes, that's correct.
And solar, that for most South Africans is completely and extremely unaffordable. How do we move to just energy transition, and where are we?
That is a very interesting question, KG. Where are we, and how are we going to implement just energy transition? I think before we start, it would be nice to explain what just energy transition really means.
Yes.
It basically means that the communities that will be affected by transitioning from fossil fuel energy, so basically, in our case in South Africa, coal-fired power plants, those communities around those areas should be involved in the decision-making in determining what happens to the future of electricity, or how we generate and transmit and consume electricity. They should not be left out of that discussion or that conversation. So that is the whole idea behind, or concept behind just energy transition. So where are we? First of all, we've just come out of a period of no load shedding.
Mm-hmm.
And as you indicated at the top of our conversation, you indicated that there was an announcement that we've gone back into load reduction.
Yes, here in Gauteng.
Here in Gauteng, exactly. South Africa is still very dependent on coal-fired power plants. That is the reality. As much as we were offered $2.5 billion, to put into context, that's about 47 billion rand plus minus. That's a lot of money. We also have to look at the reality of
a lot of money that we have to pay back with interest.
Well, with interest, yes, but good interest. I think that's a different conversation. There is still money we can access to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think our government has to be responsible in the way they accept the funds, right? We have to balance the need of the country, the need of the economy, as well as job creation, and obviously the need for us to transition. Because South Africa is not the largest polluter in the world. We are one of the largest on the continent, but we're not the largest in the world. At the same time, let's look at what is happening in Europe. They had to go back, UK for instance, and France had to go back and start coal-fired power plants because they did not have sufficient electricity supply to meet the demand to keep the economy running. They had to basically go back to coal-fired power plants, and we are doing exactly the same thing. And where are we? We are slowly moving away from coal-fired power plants and renewable energy, which is where Granville Energy plays. That's the space we play. It's now becoming the norm. And the last point that I want to touch briefly, I think we can expand on that, is the cost.
Mm-hmm.
Renewable energy is not affordable. Generally, we come from a space where power utility was never a service that was left to the hands of the individual resident or citizen. It was provided as part of the national social compact or national infrastructure development plan. In some countries, private companies got involved and were giving concessions to build power plants and then provide services to the residents of specific cities. In our case now, you're right, because it is up to individuals to go and raise funds and build solar power plants for their homes to be able to address this energy shortage or electricity crisis that we have.
Yeah. This may sound a bit lame, right? But really, as I said to the producers, I'm not the most educated person when it comes to issues of energy, but I'm going to ask this question as somebody who lives in Africa. Here I am, who lives in Africa, and I have the sun for the majority of the year, right? It's winter right now, and the sun where I am is blazing hot. And yet, for example, solar remains expensive. And it becomes so complex for me to understand why it is that it becomes so expensive when access to the sun is not that hard in the area where I live in. Are you able to explain it to me in as layman a way as possible?
I'll try, KG. Solar is expensive because we have to look at the value chain, right? At South Africa, we do not produce the components that we need to generate solar power.
Okay.
We import everything. From solar panels to the cables we need, to the battery, the lithium battery that we use. In some cases, lead-acid battery. Some people still use those old batteries. We also do not manufacture the inverters. So literally, we have to import everything, which is expensive, before we can use them here. And this is where we see an opportunity, and that is what Granville Energy is doing, where we get involved in the value chain to manufacture some of these components locally and provide services in a different way, in such a way that it becomes affordable, because that is our key objective as a company, to bring access to clean and affordable electricity to a billion people on the continent. For the country, it's an opportunity. As much as it is expensive, it also presents an opportunity for us to do other things, solve other problems. Number one, job creation through manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Then number two, obviously, we need people to go out and deploy all of the solar panels, all the solar systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we need skill development, and we need to employ a lot of young people who will then go out and do the rollout.
So it's a whole sector also in terms of development and skilling and potentially jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you look at China, for instance, China supplies or controls about 92 to 95% of the global supply chain for renewables energy, right? The main implication of that is they can now create a lot of jobs in the country, develop a lot of skills, which over time becomes advanced skills in that particular sector, and they still keep dominating. So we have an opportunity because we do have the demand. We have demand for electricity in the country, and obviously the continent at large. South Africa is a major economic player in the continent and provides economic indicators for growth of the continent. So while we have these challenges for electricity, it also presents a great opportunity for us to create jobs, develop skills that we can use in other sectors beyond solar itself, because the skills we need will not just be electrical engineers. We'll need technicians, we'll need chemical engineers, we need mechanical engineers, we need drivers, we need logistics. We basically need everybody. We need supply chain, we need lawyers, we need accountants to work in this
it's
space.
a whole sector.
Absolutely.
It's a whole sector, and it's immediate, right? It's immediate. The need is immediate for us because the energy crisis is immediate for us, right? And that's why I go back to what I said in the intro around us experiencing load reduction as of today. So what happens? What is the most immediate thing that we need to do to deal then with the emergency of the immediacy of the need of energy right now?
In my view, we have to take a different approach. Over the past 4 years, we have seen a significant increase in deployment of solar energy systems, mostly for companies who can afford to use the balance sheets to raise money from the banks or use cash to finance solar power systems. They don't feel the same impact as homeowners. If you live in any of the peri-urban areas of Johannesburg or Cape Town or Durban, in the morning people have to migrate from the township using our local lingo. We have to migrate from the township to come and work, and then we go back in the evening.
Yes.
Okay, so that travel time, we leave, wake up at 4 a.m. With no electricity, people cannot prepare to go to work or kids cannot go to school.
Yes.
Even after hours, kids cannot do the homework within the township because they don't have electricity to connect to the internet. So what we need to do is take a different approach. And what we've done, for instance, at Granville Energy, we've identified certain parts of Gauteng where we believe that the right solution is to design large-scale solar power systems, what we call microgrid, to be able to provide electricity immediately to a group of homeowners, right? If I use an example, what we do in the township, we take, let's say, about 100 homes.
Mm-hmm.
We rapidly deploy solar power systems that will share the electricity to those 100 homes. So we can get 100 homes lit up in a week,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is the approach we need to use. We need to take a large-scale approach, or what I like to call wholesale approach to problem solving, to be able to address this instead of going the piecemeal approach where we want to look at solar power systems for individual homes. We will never get there.
And then we've also seen a raise, right, Tabi, in consumers buying mini UPS and inverters and other sort of energy-saving devices. But they're expensive, obviously. Are there sort of affordable alternatives for those individual users who can't afford those devices? Or, if you have solar, it covers you holistically for all of these other smaller things that you ultimately will not use, you will not need anyway.
Right now, in our view, there is no alternative. There's no cheaper alternative. Let me put it that way. Because if you go and you buy a power bank or UPS, you still need an electricity source to charge it. It can only last, let's say, 4 hours. After 4 hours, if you don't have electricity to charge the battery or the UPS device, you're still without electricity. And also, let's be real, the power stored in those devices will not be sufficient to power most of the appliances at home. So maybe you might have access to internet and maybe your phone or your tablet. That's it. What we need is a solution that will have real impact.
Yeah.
In the township, people don't need a lot of electricity, but we need sufficient electricity to power at least lights, fridges, and television, and access to the internet so they can get along with the daily lives.
And in this conversation, we didn't even take into consideration the rural parts of South Africa.
Absolutely.
Because, we're more rural than we are urban. We concentrated our conversation on the urban parts. What happens then to the rural parts?
That's very interesting, KJ, because we have looked at the rural and peri-urban areas. That's actually where we started with our research work, when we started Granville Energy.
Yeah.
Because we believe that if we can solve the rural problem and it's economically viable for us as a business, then it becomes a lot easier for us to solve the problem in the urban areas. The best solution to look at in rural areas is to design and come up with a solar power system that is affordable to acquire and affordable to maintain. So, for instance, if we take Eastern Cape, Eastern Cape, you might have sparsely populated people, rural dwellers who live far from each other. So it becomes difficult to build a microgrid to cover all of those people. However, there is an opportunity in partnership with the local municipality to use existing infrastructure to build solar power plants to connect to this existing grid to supply electricity to these people, but using local skills. We need to understand the cost structure to ensure that we don't use the same cost as in the urban areas. That would be expensive. We need to have lean operations to keep our costs down, and also at the same time, bring some of the sourcing close to these communities.
Sure. So do we see a time where we find ways to give, particularly solar, I don't know, access, because there has to come a time where you give, particularly people who come from townships, the people that you spoke about earlier on that you say wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to come into town, to come and work, they themselves will need to have access to solar. And packages need to be created for them to access solar. What's the best way to circumvent the cost issue?
The best way is to remove the burden for capital access from those homeowners. And by the way, not everybody who lives in the township owns their own house. Remember, you still have to rent. So those who rent might not even have the access to them and borrow money from the bank or from any lender to be able to buy solar power system. What we've done as Granville, and I believe, in my opinion, is the best approach, is to design and build microgrids.
Yeah.
That way, the homeowners don't have to lay out any capex.
Yeah.
Basically, it's an alternative to what they're currently used to, like ESCOM or the municipality.
Yeah.
We can provide electricity for them, and they pay by consumption instead of going out to take a loan and buy a solar power system, which they still have to maintain. Over time, those things need to replace. So it's not a viable option.
How do people get in touch with your company, Tabby, if they want to engage further on solar?
They can go to our website. It's www.granville-energy.com or granville.energy.
Fantastic. Thank you for your insights, and thank you so much for your time, Tabby.
Thank you, KG.
Thank you. Tabby, CEO of Granville Energy. Granville, by the way, is spelled with an A. It's Granville. It's 11:32. Modupi Mohlahlana is standing by with the news headlines.
Thank you very much, KG, and a very good morning to you. In your headlines, Asawa, there's still no legal framework in place following a national dialogue on coalitions, which was hosted 10 months ago. 180 families at Otongati, north of Durban, have been identified as being in dire need of assistance following last week's tornado. And the National Consumer Commission has urged anyone in possession of a 50mm single-use neutralizing shampoo in Dark and Lovely Moisture Plus to stop using it immediately. Details of these and other stories at midday.
When my son was accepted for national championships, I wasn't prepared for the costs. Then I remembered that Cash Converters has a 30-day cash advance loan. Just go to your nearest Cash Converters store with your jewelry, electronics, tech, or something valuable. They'll keep it safe for you, and you'll walk out with the cash you need. This loan made it possible for my son's dreams to come true. Now I'm a proud mom of a champion. Cash Converters. We buy, we sell, we loan cash.
One outfit will walk away with sad faces when Bakaga clash with Amatax. They both feel it is time to go back to the PSL, but they must deliver football intelligence on the field. Who belongs to the top league of Ipola Lasemzansi? Bakaga or the students? This is the Premier Soccer League promotional playoffs. Baroka FC tackles Pretoria University FC on Wednesday, 12 June at 3 p.m. live on SABC3 and SABC radio stations. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You're listening to the National Pulse on SAFM.
What are your thoughts about coalition choices?
We said we are open to talk to everybody, including the MK party. And it's very difficult to talk to people there because when you talk to them, they tell you that they are still waiting for Ubaba.
Anyone seen
Ubaba? Have you seen him? Have you seen him? And Ubaba gatholakala.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM. Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM. You are listening to KG Mwekezi on SAFM.
11:35 now. We are shifting gear and we're ending the show by talking to the clergy as they've called for a day of prayer around the state of the country. In a statement that they released over the weekend, the South African Council of Churches says that it has concluded that a special meeting of the National Leaders Forum, where leaders of member churches came together to reflect on where the country is at the moment from the time of the elections to also the issue of the natural disasters that have hit 3 provinces. They are seeking God's wisdom for guidance and to get their view. We're joined on the line by Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, who is the president of the South African Council of Churches. Good morning, Archbishop. Thank you so much for your time. Tell me about your meeting and why you've even felt the need to have it as the South African Council of Churches. Good morning.
Good morning, Member Cathy, and your listeners. We meet frequently as the National Church Leaders Forum to reflect on a number of issues. What made us to meet more regularly is COVID-19, when we had to reflect on policies and on how we can work together. So this was part and parcel of us saying, here is a societal matter where there is no outright majority in the 7th administration elections, but we were also facing the issues of natural disasters where God's people were displaced by water and tornadoes, and some had even died. And we said, now, what should be a uniquely faith response to such? And now, on the general elections, we agreed that we needed to give the political parties time and space to do the work that they need through the intricacies of building a governmental architecture or an infrastructure. But that, we said, as the governed, because democracy is not about political leadership only. It is about those that we give the right to govern us, and then us as the governed. We said, as the governed, this government of national unity or whatever governmental architecture must reflect certain basic values which are enshrined in the Constitution, and fortunately those values are also constitutional values like inclusivity, cooperation, and commitment to resolving the priorities of our nation. And we said, as a start, they need to prioritize fighting poverty, eradicating corruption, dealing with the pandemic of gender-based violence and femicide and crime, and fixing our education system. So that is really what we said our people should pray for and should focus on, and the politicians, as they meet, should be given the space, but they should know these values.
Yeah, and you are calling for also a national day of prayer for South Africa.
Yes, we most of our churches prayed yesterday. And
it's happened already. My apologies.
Yes, it happened already. And I mean, for example, if time allows, I could read the prayer that I penned.
Go ahead.
Yes, for the Anglicans and some. I mean, the prayer went like this. Lord God, you are the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. We prayed for a peaceful election, and our petitions were granted. We prayed for free and fair elections, even serving as observers, and our prayers were answered. We prayed for magnanimity in accepting the outcome of the elections. Now, at a point where no one has the majority, we pray for unity and collegiality as parties seek to form a government. May the needs of those on the margins be at the heart of their engagements and exploration. May the interests of power and politics take second place to those of peace, stability, and prosperity. Guide and support the leaders of political parties and strengthen the agency of all South Africans, for you live and reign one God, world without end. Amen.
Amen. So this prayer was said across most churches yesterday. How many make up the membership of the South African Council of Churches, Archbishop, currently?
Well, the General Secretary really can give the number, but we are mainly in all the mainline churches, and then we've got other churches that are not usually what we call the mainline churches that have joined us. We've got organizations, NGOs that have aligned to our programs and are members of the South African Council of Churches. But of course, we don't represent all the churches. But in the main, we are still the main representatives of the churches.
Of most of the churches in South Africa.
Most of the churches in South Africa, yes.
And of course, also the discussion included the weather disasters that we faced across 3 provinces in South Africa last week.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the discussions, the leaders were very concerned about the disaster, and we sent our condolences to the families that have been affected in those three provinces. And we also received reports that, as an example, the Dutch Reformed Church, the Salvation Army, the Anglican Church, the Catholics, and the others were already working on the ground with those that are affected. And then one of the critical things that we said we should work as a collective, not as individuals. As an example, the Anglican Church in the Western Cape has always donated to Gift of the Givers, and we will continue to do that. And it becomes an interfaith response to what God's people are going through. And Memweketi, that when such disasters happen, you see climate injustice at its highest. That those that are unable to mitigate the impact of climate change or climate impact are the ones that suffers the most.
Yeah.
And the church is called to do something.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, because the impasse continues, and I'm sure we'll talk again. This is the week where we should know something, at least at a political level, because that aftermath of the 7th general election demands that this is the week that we should know something. So we hopefully will get a statement from your desk again after something has officially been announced. But thank you for your time, Archbishop.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, as you know, is the Archbishop of the Anglican Church. He spoke to us, though, in his capacity as the President of the South African Council of Churches. We are done. It is time for the book reading. Don't forget, though, at 12 o'clock midday, it's updated noontime with Sakina Kamwendo, and the other shows that are coming later is the Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, the National Pulse with Ashraf Gada, MoneyWeb Market Update with Jimmy Muyaha, and Top Spot with Michael Abramson. The Talking Point team today was Lebo Mosweu and Kanya Bonani, and Sia Daniel is the technical person. They've got Angela is the intern who joined them, and I'm Khomotso, and I came to visit with them. Cathy will be back tomorrow. It's time for the book reading. The book is The Door by Abna Mariri. It's narrated by Samson Kumalo.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of The Door, an addict's journey, read by Samson Kumalo.
I always looked forward to Sundays. Not only was it a day where we got to dress up and go to the house of worship, but it was a day where we could enjoy and feast on some quality food, at least by our standards. The China cookery reserved for special visitors was brought out, tables decorated, and the food comprised slaughtered chicken, rice, potato salad, and beetroot. It was a feast to behold, and every Saturday afternoon in preparation of Sunday, my mother would send us to go buy a live chicken. We would buy eggs, milk, and chicken, and on more special occasions like traditional weddings, a sheep would feature on the menu from a farm nearby owned and operated by whites. It was always a mission to go to the farm. Little white boys saw us as toys to tease and play with, and every time we went, they would unleash their dogs on us, and these dogs seemed to be trained to attack only black people. We became victims every time, and we could not defend ourselves as it was illegal for us to attack and beat white people. Imagine, we were supporting them with our hard-earned little income, and still they never saw us as customers who should have been treated with some semblance of dignity. We were humiliated, but we had no alternative, and if we wanted to have a good quality meal, we had to swallow our pride and get that chicken. My mother was a pro at snatching the life out of the fowl. At times it would be 2 or 3 of them, depending on the nature of the occasion. We had a relatively large family, so we usually had to get a few. I would watch her slaughter the chicken with precision, and occasionally she would allow me to help her as she poured on boiling water so we could peel off the feathers. This was an art that I'm sure was passed from one generation to the next. She was incredibly talented at slicing and dicing these chickens, and we ate every part of them. Even the head was a delicacy. I was particularly fond of chicken legs, and who best to cook them than my grandmother? She turned those walkaways into something that would embarrass the best of modern-day restaurants. Since I was her favorite, I would somehow get the lion's share of this delicacy. Even the feathers were never wasted and found their way into our pillows. The incredible creativeness of my mother was out of this world. I always said that had my mother been properly educated, she would have been a successful woman. Unfortunately, she came from a family of 10, grew up on a farm, and later relocated to Alexander Township and lived in abject poverty. As for the chickens we chowed every Sunday, I always felt pity that the little creature that was alive and well, but ended up on my lunch table. Unfortunately, every Sunday and during Christmas, we ate nothing but chicken, and ultimately I grew to detest the smell. Ironically, my parents belonged to a Dutch Reformed church. For the life of me, I could never understand why we went to this church. Even the black reverend sometimes preached in Afrikaans, a language I refused subconsciously to learn, even though we were subjected at our schools to learn everything in Afrikaans. Mathematics, physics, geography, everything was to be done in Afrikaans. I detested the language, and I knew that I wouldn't go any further in my education as the language proved completely difficult for me. Our church sometimes received visitors of a lighter hue, and I would be fascinated that these white pastors actually visited townships like ours. I mean, please, the Dutch Reformed Church was the oppressor's church. However, what I do remember about our family church was the incredible melodious choir to which I later belonged, and this is where my spiritual journey began. I fell in love with music, and it seemed to me every black person was a musician. We sang everywhere. During funerals, when we did drama at church, at weddings, we even sang in our own homes. My grandmother loved hymns. She would be deep in thought as she sang her hymns, and I would watch with fascination and wonder where her mind was sending her. The wrinkles on her face and her worn-out body told a silent tale of years and years of enduring brutal treatment. She would be present with us, but equally absent and her mind far away. Perhaps being filled with gratitude of how, in spite of it all, she was still alive and well with the family intact, or remembering her young days. Besides the choir, at church I didn't care whether I understood what the preacher was talking about. For me, it was a time to flaunt my wares and be with my friends chasing chicks, even though we were afraid to approach them. As I grew older, I became fascinated with the man of the cross who died for the sins of others, who was said to be the savior of the world. How is this possible? I would question why an individual who was powerful and all-knowing would reduce himself to a life of poverty in order to reach out to others. I found the concept a little daunting, and it left me wondering and asking questions no one could answer. They even claimed that he died a horrific and painful death to save a world that inadvertently hated him. That got stuck in my mind somehow, and I needed to find out more about him. I remember once walking around our local town with a friend, and we decided to visit one of the churches, thinking that we could because they'd visited ours. But we were told it was only a white sanctuary, and if we wanted to worship, we were welcome to go to the township. I found this quite disturbing. We were not good enough in our dark skin to fellowship with them. On the walls, I could see pictures of this white, blue-eyed person who apparently died for me. But he was white. The contradictions were deeply confusing. They called him the man of peace, and yet the very perpetrators of hatred were great proponents of his works. The oppressors and custodians of apartheid were using the same man as weapon of division. The confusion I felt pricked my ears up to the rumblings of the revolution. Black consciousness and the Steve Bantu Biko revolutionary message was finding fertile ground among young Africans. The clock was ticking for the imminent demise of apartheid machinery. The winds of change were blowing, and there was an air of expectation among many of us. Interesting and yet difficult times lay ahead. I'm sure the apartheid system had been shaken by the Soweto uprising and the violent demonstrations that saw many children killed and others simply missing or disappeared. We were far away from Soweto, but were bitten by the yearning for freedom. The regime became vicious, and we had to play safe and guard ourselves. At the time, apartheid was at its worst, and you could be arrested for anything and beaten for anything. There were many political formations, and you could smell resistance from afar. I met 3 friends, and we developed a very close relationship. David Mulapo, Andreas Mabucha, and Augustine Musehle. David was the flamboyant one, afraid of nothing and willing to try anything. He came from a good family. Andreas was tall, very reserved and quiet and a little shy. Augustine, Goes as we called him, laughed at anything that happened, always jolly and very studious. We were driven and wanted to better our lives and that of our families. We were hungry for success. We saw no barriers and we believed in ourselves. We wanted nothing but a better life. We dressed well and spoke well of each other. We never fought. We were a new generation. All our families were poor except for Andreas. His father was our reverend and they lived in a mission house which was relatively big. But poverty never defined us. We never judged each other. Even so, the rest of us were fascinated by the Mabuchas. One of Andreas' brothers, Sam, was even at the university. Reverend Mabucha was well versed in various languages and could even preach in Afrikaans. I came to know the entire family very well, and our families became the best of friends. I was fascinated by the books Reverend Mabucha had in his house. This was an educated black man who oozed confidence and could command the master's language with ease. We knew there was something better out there, and we wanted to find it. We challenged each other's paradigms and looked out for each other's interests. We were our brother's keepers. Our parents went to the same church and we became the best of buddies. We did everything together and even joined the choir and the church drama team. Like most teenagers, we were all sexually inexperienced and naive. Girls were relatively high on our agenda, but we were all scared of approaching them, thankfully, because that meant bettering ourselves and making something of ourselves became our pervading mission. I had a massive crush on my classmate Maria. What a beauty! I was smitten, but I was just too afraid to talk to her. David and I spent a lot of time together, and we broke ranks for a while with our other 2 friends. We encountered and befriended 2 guys from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Arthur and Ron. They seemed to be real ladies' men, and their church was much more progressive than ours. Their church had great music and musicians, and they were always incredibly well-dressed. The SDA church occasionally invited Afro-Americans to visit the country, and that fascinated me. These people were confident in themselves, and it looked like they came from another planet. I was loving what I was being exposed to. David and Goes were ahead of us in school, and they seemed more street smart than me and Andreas. High school was much better for me than primary school. I attended Pulong High School, and the level of commitment from both teacher and student was out of this world, and the school was good for me. David recruited me to go there. I took to my books and was committed to my studies. I joined the student movement and was invited to an SCM gathering where someone was talking about the 3 Hebrew boys in the Bible, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, who defied the decrees of the king and decided to burn rather than bow down and violate their vows and principles. I was fascinated. And when the invitation was made to be like one of those Hebrew boys, I was the first one to respond and found myself being prayed for and celebrated for being born again. I was given a small Bible and decided to read it for myself. David and I grew even closer. We were like brothers and shared everything. At the time, it was clear that my parents needed assistance, and since they couldn't provide for my brother to further his education, he had to go and find a job. My eldest brother had not finished school and was already out working and generating money for himself, as well as helping out in the house. My